Senator from Oregon would be willing to enter into just a bit of a dialogue with me. I'd like to ask him a couple of questions, but also respond to his efforts on a bipartisan way to move forward with comprehensive reform.
I recognize the senator from Indiana, and without objection.
Mr. President, I would ask the senator, first of all, let me say, it's been a delight to work with Senator from Oregon, a colleague. Tax reform is not easy. It hasn't happened in 25 years, comprehensive tax reform. This is not what we're talking about today, but we're setting the stage for that, and I think that's important. But I do want to ask the question, and I certainly agree with the senator from Oregon, that the bipartisan product that came out of committee is something that has been negotiated. Members had opportunities to make adjustments and get their provisions looked at, voted on. Some were voted down, some were voted in. But now it moves to the whole Senate floor, and those of us who don't serve on that committee have some suggestions as to how we think we can make the bill even better. I laid out 3 provisions that I'm interested in. One is a very simple piece of legislation or addition to the bill that would give a notice to charities that are being terminated from their 501c3 tax-exempt status so that they have a chance to rectify the error or the problem. That seems like, to me, something that's very sensible. It's totally relevant. And yet I'm now prohibited, unless the majority leader comes forward and allows us to offer amendments, I'm prohibited from offering that specific provision. We all know that there's many good things in here that we support. There's some that we, maybe yes, maybe no, and there's some probably bad things we don't want to support. But all we are asking for is the opportunity now to enter into the procedure that the senator and I both have enjoyed in the past, so we can debate some of this on the floor. Could the senator give me an indication of whether or not we just shut down the process now of any additions or modifications or reforms to this bill and vote on this? Obviously, these, and I know the senator knows this, obviously people aren't going to get these higher taxes imposed on them tomorrow if we don't pass this today. These expire at the end of the year. The House is on a different path in terms of dealing with these. We're going to have to reconcile the differences. So the real issue doesn't take effect. I mean, the concern doesn't take effect until the end of the year. So that gives us plenty of time to debate, gives us plenty of time to talk about reforms that we might make, additions and constructive additions, some of which I've mentioned. So I would ask my friend from Oregon, would he be willing to encourage the majority leader to offer us that opportunity to make some adjustments, hopefully constructive, all relevant, maybe even a limited amount to the legislation, so that we feel at least we've had the opportunity to represent the voices of the people that we represent here in Washington.
First, I want to be clear on a couple of points. This idea that there really aren't any immediate consequences. I know my friend from Indiana spends a lot of time talking to businesses, as I do, and these businesses are up in arms about the fact that the Senate cannot deal with this because it doesn't give them certainty and predictability that they need to go out and make those orders and hire those workers. As my friend knows, so many of those businesses make quarterly payments, April and June and others. So I want my colleagues to understand that the idea that, oh, maybe this is going to get worked out another time, when you're home for this recess and you're walking down Main Street and you're talking to people who are going to pay those higher taxes and aren't able to make those investments and hire those workers and make those decisions now, they're not going to be happy that the Senate said, oh, we'll see if maybe it'll work out some other time or retroactive or something like that. They're making quarterly payments. They're making decisions right now. Second, and the senator from Indiana knows because of our work how much I want to do comprehensive reform. One of the reasons that Senator Hatch and I made the judgment together that we were going to focus on extenders is because these are provisions that have essentially already expired. I didn't get a chance to hear all of my friend's presentation, but I know, for example, that he cares a great deal about the medical device tax. I joined him in voting to repeal the medical device tax when we had a vote earlier. I think it has real implications, as I know my friend does, for innovation and jobs. It is not an extender. It is not in line with the framework that Senator Hatch and I agreed on a bipartisan basis to do now. We said, we're going to do extenders now, and tell you the truth, if we can get through the extenders, starting with a favorable vote today, it will give us even more time to do what my friend from Indiana is talking about, both in terms of comprehensive reform and I know looking at other issues. If, however, we can't deal with the extenders, the message is going to go out far and wide. Well, how are they going to do comprehensive tax reform when they couldn't even on the Senate floor pass this legislation, which got such overwhelming support in the Senate Finance Committee? So I renew my pledge to work very closely with my colleague from Indiana and just repeat that the idea that somehow everything's going to turn out fine down the road, I just don't buy that. In a fragile economy, when businesses can't plan, they don't have the certainty of knowing what the rules are going to be and when they're going to kick in, that affects business decisions today in a negative way. And when people are making those quarterly payments, we better believe that there are going to be small businesses and others very unhappy if we see a tax increase, which is what will happen today. And I have to apologize to my colleague from Indiana because I have to be somewhere else and I'm late, but I just close by way of saying I know of the sincerity of my colleague. It's why I mentioned that charitable provision that allows for the IRA rollover into charity. No one, colleagues, has done more good work advocating for charities in my time in public service than the distinguished senator from Indiana, and I simply wanted him to know that at least we were making a beginning in this legislation, and I'm committed to working with him in the days ahead. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I thank the allocates from my partner on comprehensive tax reform, and I appreciate and understand where he's trying to come from. It is true that some of the amendments that have been proposed don't exactly directly apply to the extenders. They do apply to taxes, and they are sensible. We can limit that if the senator, if the majority leader would agree, we could limit those to directly apply to the extenders. Look, I mean, everyone knows that if we go forward here, if we prevent this from happening today because the majority leader prevents us from having amendments, we're going to finish this bill by the end of next week before the recess period. So we're not talking about a do it today or it's done forever situation here. This is going to be resolved in the United States Senate within the next several business days, probably moving into next week. All we're asking for really is the opportunity to make some improvements to this. There are some who say, I can't vote for this bill because this piece that the committee has agreed to is so egregious, it overwhelms all the good that I see in it. Others are simply say, well, okay, sometimes you have to take the less good, good being the perfect being the enemy of the good, and it's the only way we can get to a bipartisan position. So yes, I'll lean forward, even though I object to this particular provision. But at least they can say I had the opportunity to make the point to my colleagues that why is this in there? Why is something that's this egregious? This doesn't fit the model of what we're looking for in terms of growth and innovation and sensible tax policy. And let's put that to a vote. We'll still end up with a bill at the end that'll either have it in or have it out, but we will have had the opportunity to debate it with our colleagues, not just simply carte blanche, oh, here's what we decided in committee, and we're not going to give any of the rest of us an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, I think we can make it better. I think this provision, I don't understand why it's in there, but let's put it to a vote. Let's debate it on both sides. How did it get in there? Why did it get in there? What good does it do? If they can't make the case, they may lose the vote. If they can make the case, they'll win the vote. Isn't that what we're here for? Aren't we here to make our case, put it to a vote, the American people then look at it and say, at least I know how my senator voted on this particular issue, which is very important to me. And we go home and we either defend our vote successfully or we don't. If we don't, and enough people think we're on the wrong track, they have the opportunity to go to the polls and send somebody else in place of us. What are my colleagues afraid of? They're afraid of taking any kind of a vote that someone back home might not think is the right thing to do? We are set here to exercise our best judgment, to represent the people that sent us here, to stand up for their interests, and then take the consequences at the next election, yay or nay. They'll send us back or they'll find someone else to send here. But the procedures before us now, the gag rule imposed by the majority leader, not my friend from Oregon, but the gag rule imposed by the majority leader simply says, you're in the minority, you didn't win the election, and therefore you have no rights. Despite what the Senate has done for over 200 years, despite what other Democrat leaders have honored in terms of the rights of the senators, I'm shutting all that off, says the majority leader. You have no rights. You can't offer any amendments, any improvements to this bill. We're taught from the beginning, in terms of how laws are made, that it's a process. And the process is that everybody gets their input. And then you decide which you want to support. And if you can cobble together a majority for supporting, you end up winning. All this will be determined here in the next week. And so a vote today in protest of our inability to be gagged, to be shut down by the majority leader, doesn't mean we're opposed to good provisions that my colleague from Oregon said, this has bipartisan, nearly unanimous consent. Vote today is whether or not we're going to have the opportunity to say anything, to do anything, to make this a better bill or to get our input in. I listed 3 things here that I think directly relate to taxes. If the parliamentarian determined that those weren't relevant to the particular bill, I'll accept that. I think they are relevant. My colleagues would accept that. And we're tailoring things that we think here go directly to what the issue of the day is. But yet we're not offered the opportunity to do anything about it. I cannot understand why my Democrat colleagues can't see the injustice of that, the unfairness of that. If they were in the minority, they would be standing where I am, basically making the same point. How could you conceivably, you Republicans, conceivably say that I've been elected here, but I have no way of representing the voice of the people that sent me here? I have no way of offering a means of improving this bill or taking out something that I find totally egregious. But I'm willing to accept how the vote turns out. I'm not necessarily trying to stop the bill from going forward. I'm trying to make it better. I think if the shoe was on the other foot, my colleagues would simply say, that is an egregious, that's not the way the Senate's supposed to work. It's not why I came here. I came here to be a participant. I didn't come here to be told by the majority leader that I have no right to offer an amendment, a relevant amendment to legislation that's before us. It's a total neuterization of the minority rights in a body that was conceived by our founders and a tradition that has been held for more than 200 years to be a deliberative body. Deliberative doesn't mean the majority leader walks over from his office and says, you have no right. You have no right to offer an amendment. We're taking that right away from you. Deliberative means we stand here and talk to each other like we just did. It's pretty rare. We're 2 of us, same page on comprehensive tax reform, and probably on extenders. Where 2 of us have a chance to go back and forth with each other. Mr. President, I know that time has run out. It's about time to call for a vote. No one should mistake a vote against this as a vote against tax extenders. It could be a protest. I'm not sure where we'll end up here, but it could be a protest vote on the basis of the fact that, you know, we want to have our rights honored. We want to be able to participate. We want to be able to go home and say, I had a chance to take your voice to the Senate, debate it. It was voted on. It either passed or it didn't pass, but I gave it everything I had. And I don't want to go home and say, I didn't have a chance to even raise my voice on behalf of your voice and achieve any kind of debate, deliberation, or vote on this amendment. That is not why we are sent here. And my Democrat colleagues need to understand, continue to support what the majority leader is doing impacts their rights and their people's rights as much as it does ours. With that, I know the time has expired and I yield the floor.